And my father told me that as soon as a girl got to be 12 years old, the master would go into her, and then Wash would take care of everything from then on. So we had a large family, because remember, he was a stud on a plantation for all of his life. Now, where the story begins to connect with general history, he had three main sons, and one of them was Marshall, and the other was probably Clarence. That's where all of us was named after one of our great uncles. So one of them was born, my father said it was the year the stars fell. Now, this is a slave interpretation. When I looked in the almanac, it was 1831 or 1833 when a great meteor shower hit that part of the earth, right? And the slaves interpreted it as the stars falling. They didn't know anything about meteors, right? So they named it the year the stars fell, because they were slaves, didn't have calendars and what have you. So anyway, those three uncles, first, one of them was born the year the stars fell. So let's say that's 1831 or 1833. Now, these three sons was grown by the time the Civil War started. And all of them joined the Union Army. And my father told me that they fought in the Battle of Vicksburg. And he told me that they swam the Mississippi River 3 times. And I was wondering, why would they have to swim it 3 times? I was leaving Louisiana, and I was going into Vicksburg, Mississippi. And I saw a sign that said Mississippi River. Then I went a little further, and it said Mississippi River. And then by the time I got into Vicksburg, there was the other sign said Mississippi River. What it is, you know, where rivers can run like a S, and if you're going straight, then you will cross that river 3 times. And the way they described it, they said that black people was pitching white people like hay. You know, they used to use them old pitchforks, and they'd get the hay, and then they would pitch it on the wagon and what have you. Well, remember, all of them was just leaving slavery, and so they are all very strong. And they was taking them bayonets and sticking it, you know, in Southern soldiers. You have to remember that they're right out of slavery, and the people that they're fighting, go ahead.
No, I think I missed where was he located? Where was the Wash being located?
Okay, in the first part of the Civil War, we was in Alabama. Then, as the war got heated up, we were taken to Louisiana. Okay, in Louisiana, we stayed there for quite some time. Okay, then we migrated, maybe half of the family migrated to Arkansas. I don't know if you've met any of the Reams family out there in Oakland that we didn't have a lot of contact with. But they were Reams. They looked basically, you know, like we did. But I met one in the bank one time. The Bank of America used to be on 94th Avenue. It's long gone now, and East 14th. And I came in with a big check, that I had got from somewhere. Actually, it was a refund for the government for stealing my money. And I looked at the teller, his name was Reams. And he looked at me, he said, "I've heard a lot about you." And then he looked at the check and he said, "That's basically what I heard right there." You know the big numbers on the check. Anyway, the way we got to Arkansas was we migrated to Arkansas from Louisiana. Remember, if we're up there in Alabama, that's further north, and they're liberating the slaves as they go. So the further south you can go and stay in the United States is Louisiana, right? So our family stayed in Louisiana for quite some time. Then after that, I don't know whether it was half of the family or a lot of our family came up to.
Doing Reconstruction where, because I know we got a lot of black communities in Louisiana, right post-Civil War, right, where people were thriving for a little bit.
Okay, let me give you one of the. First, let me relate to how my father is linked to Wash Reams. Wash Reams was born in 1800. My father is born in 1900. Okay, Wash Reams lived to be 106 years old. So my father was 6 years old when he died. Now you have to remember, people didn't do anything much in those days. They didn't have all this different recreation and what have you. So my father sat and listened to the old people all the time, just like I sat and listened to my father, different than the rest of the family, right? That's why I have retained a lot of our history. The same thing my father did, and so he knew Wash Reams for about 6 years. And so he would consciously remember him for 1 or 2 years maybe. Then the other thing to remember is the town that we was from, Wabasika, Arkansas, was those little southern towns. Everybody knew each other's history. The towns were structured so it was one main white man in town, or maybe two, but usually those southern towns had one main white man. A lot of stuff was named after him, and he basically ran the town, just like in the movies. The sheriff and everybody was tied to him. He owned the general store, he owned the cotton gin, he owned all those things. Okay, that's the way our town was. Now remember, I remember our town structure very well, because I was 6 years old when I went to California. But we went back from time to time. Now, about our relatives, after slavery, many relatives went to find each other. Some traveled for years, they never found their relatives. Some, because we were separated and sold, and so people went looking after slavery, during Reconstruction, and all up until the 1900s, people were still looking for their relatives because the family ties was closer then. Imagine if a master has the ability to sell your mother, sell your sister, sell your brother, and what have you, that would make you even closer. Okay, so my father told me about one situation there in Wabasiki. One of the families, part of our family, had found some other part of the family, and they died on the spot. They were so happy. That's what he's related to me. So during the last century, up until the 1930s, like there's a statistic that says in 1936, 76% of black families were full family households, higher than whites, mother and father. Okay. In 1970, it had flipped from 30% of black families was in two-parent households and 70% were not. That's an amazing statistic. You see, because by that time they had turned the dynamics upside down to where we was not attached to families as much as we was during and right after slavery. So anyway, that's how we have a continuous family history further than most blacks by memory. See, remember now, I'm giving you a direct connection from my father and his father. Most blacks, they go on these websites and they find sending us some blood sounds, some stuff, and they find their old relatives. I'm giving you a on-the-spot rendition of what my direct father told me. That's why our family remained intact.
Who's your grandfather?
My grandfather was Cephas Reams. Cephas Reams. His name is on that, I don't know if you saw pictures of Star Bethel, that church that was in Wabasiki. My grandfather was he was a deacon at that time. They founded that church in 1900. The church is still there right now. In fact, I visited it.
I've been in the church one time. My grandma took me over there.
Right, and you saw the name. Did you see the name outside on that stone? Yeah, that's the founding stone. It's still there. Yeah. Yeah, his name was Cephas Reams. Okay, so now I don't know what year he was born, but my grandmother was born in 1871. 1871. And then she was, I knew her very well. She didn't pass away till up around 1960 or something like that. It was at least that long. Her name was Jessie Ann Reams, and she was born in 1871. You got to remember, that's taking you right smack dab in the middle of Reconstruction. So they were all, the benefit that I have is that I'm the youngest in the family. Okay, I'm the youngest family member from Arkansas. Okay, your grandmother had Sherry when I was 8 years old. So Sherry was the first one born in California, right? So all the rest of the family was born in California. I'm the last one that was born in Arkansas. Now also remember that being born in Arkansas, you would also pick up the heavy culture and a lot of the things that was going on, I remember from my own memory, so my grandmother was someone that I remember. The last time I saw her was when I was about 12 years old. I think I went back in 56 or 57. It was 57. I went back to see her. We just went back there. And we have actually very close contacts to the original period of slavery. The other thing I'd like to remind you of is I was born in 1945. So now you can imagine your grandmother and them was born. She was at least 10 years older than I was. Yeah, she was 10 years older than I was. She was born in 35. They have a serious memory about all of this. Now, when I was born in 45, that means that everybody that was over 80 years old, right, was born in slavery. Okay, now your grandmother that was born in 1935, that means she really has, she probably never talked about it, but the people that were in slavery in her time was only 70 years old. So you can imagine the number of people, them old folks sitting on them rocking chairs, you know, was born in slavery.
Hold on, I can't hear you. I think I accidentally.
Okay, you can't hear me? Oh, that's fine. Okay, that was on his side.
The last like 30 seconds was muted. And Charles just joined to listen into.
Okay, so you had about 30 seconds that was muted. Okay, I'll return back to 1935 when you, huh?
You said everybody was in slavery with that was about 80 when you were born.
Right, when I was born, anybody over 80 years old was born in slavery. Remember slavery ended in 1865? Well, technically it ended in 1860, but we considered when the Civil War was over that's when you was really up and free. So but now your grandmother, she used to take care of me because she was, of course, my sister, she was born in 1935. So you have to remember that the people will only be 70 years old, and they were all born in slavery. So that means that our family is different because our parents, like my parents, were old, you know. Like my father was 45 years old when I was born. So that means most people left parents 20, 25, maybe 30 at the most. So we can go further back just by memory. And then when you link the circular memory of all the people living close together in those old southern towns, then each one is a repository of the history of that area. Yeah. Of each other's history.
So what was the do you know, well, a couple things. So what was the reason to go to Wabasaki? Or and the reason to leave Wabasaki and then go to California?
Oh yeah, well, why would we leave? We was right in the middle of the great Negro migration. You know, that's the greatest migration in American history. Not going across in covered wagons, but black people leaving the South. You got to remember, the South was packed with black people. Now, you also have to think of how we lived. You got to remember, we lived, those old cabins and what have you we lived in, they didn't have running water. You had to go out and get your water from a pump. You know what I mean? We had outdoor toilets, of course. We lived the same way settlers used to live in the Old West. That's exactly the way we lived. Not only us, but most of America, like outside of the cities, lived like that in those days until electricity. After the late 30s and the 40s, they began to electrify all of America. You know, okay, so, but in the country, I remember we got electricity in 1950. Before that, we used them old coal lanterns and stuff. We used all of that. When you got water, you went out to the pump, those old pumps, and that's the way you got your water. That was the way. That was a normal lifestyle. We didn't sleep in beds. We slept on pallets. You know, we slept on the floor and all that. And if you saw a rat in the house, you would take out a .22 pistol and shoot at it, or a rifle. They had a slug for rats. You know, a little bitty slug, and you actually in your house, and you shot at the rat. You didn't have big traps and stuff. You actually shot at the thing. Okay, so why did we leave the South? I remember very clearly. First of all, Uncle Hosey and them from St. Louis. He was a chauffeur. He was the husband of Aunt Dell. My Aunt Dell. You've heard? Did you ever meet her?
Yeah, when I lived at Grandma's house when I was in high school, she lived there with us. So for like my last 3 years of high school, you know, she was my roommate.
Yeah. Do you remember? You may not know. Aunt Dell was born in 1898.
Okay.
She was older than my father. That's my father's oldest sister. She was born in 1898. So you can see these centuries that we're crossing. Those centuries, this 20th century, then into this century now. So our family touched all of those centuries with a lot of stability. But now to the question, why did we leave Arkansas? While we were there, we had relatives always coming down from the north. The first of our relatives moved just above, up to St. Louis and Kansas City, to Missouri. Remember, there was an argument in the old days about whether Missouri would be a free state or say. So the first migration of black people, or our family, many of the families, was from the deep south up to Missouri. And that's, but now all of our relatives that came from Minnesota, Wisconsin, and they came from Michigan and all those states, when they came down there, they were driving new cars. Can you imagine? Now you got to remember, we had only thing we had on our farm was cotton wagons, them old time Western wagons, you know, cotton wagons. That's what we had. Now you got to remember. Imagine all your relatives went north. When they come back down, they're driving what would be classified as a white folks' car. They're driving better cars than the white folks have in town. Now, when you see that, you begin to make your additions is, how good can we do here in Arkansas? Now, we owned land in Arkansas, and we were not poor. We were not poor. You know, I thought we was poor because we had pumps and I said that when my father died, and Juanita, my sister, corrected me right there at Allen Temple Church. She, in her talk, you know, in her eulogy, she said we were not poor. You know, in other words, my father had money for Negro money for back down in Dixie. You know what I mean? So But I thought, well, we slept on pallets and we, you know what I mean, used pumps for water. That's what everybody did, right? So I thought the reason we moved to the west was because my father came to the conclusion that we would be better out there. So what he did, he went out to California before us, got a job, and then when he sent us money for tickets, we all got on the back of the Greyhound bus, the whole family. We went to Pine Bluff and we caught the bus to California, and we came out there, and that's how we got out there with all the other black families. You have to remember, there was a migration pattern in the South. The people in Texas and Arkansas and those areas, a few from Mississippi, went west. The people from Mississippi, you know what I mean, Alabama and those places, they went up to Chicago. Remember the relatives we have in Chicago? Okay, some went up to Chicago. Then the people on this coast, if you're in D.C., most of the people were from Carolina, most of the people in Philadelphia, Carolina, and those places. So they came straight up north. So there was 3 migration patterns. Some went straight up to the north, and they landed in D.C., Baltimore, Philadelphia, New York, New Jersey, and all of those places. Then the other migration pattern was from Mid-South, and they migrated to Chicago and places like that. And then us, we were in Arkansas and Texas. They migrated, that Route 66, we followed the whole migration pattern. That's how we got out there, Route 66, you know. All right, so that's why we went out there, because people, if you got a regular job, imagine in Mississippi, 1965, of course we'd been out there a long time by then, you made $2 a day picking cotton and all of that in Mississippi in 1965. Okay, if you're making $3 an hour in California, in those big factories in Michigan, right? What are you going to do? Even if you have a family, they had one woman that was in a newspaper in about 59 in Oakland. She had 10 kids. She came out to California and got on welfare, right? And she got over $400 a month. Now, other people would say she was a welfare queen, but she would have been stupid to stay down south and starve to death, right? But she could come out to California, go up to New York, right? Or go up to Chicago, get on welfare. See, remember, they didn't have that type of welfare in the South. And what was that? What did you say?
No, I said, I didn't realize welfare was state by state.
Yeah, welfare now is state by state. Welfare is, okay, now just imagine. You know, the lifestyle in California went like this when we first got out there. Okay, like say around 59. A lot of people, in fact, Tommy used to work in the cannery down there. Didn't he used to work at Del Monte or something? Yeah. Down on San Leandro Boulevard? Okay, this was a lifestyle right there in Oakland. First of all, you could get a job anywhere as soon as you got out there. Oakland was an industrial city. I mean, it was booming. Remember, this is the post-war period. And most of the world is just recovering from World War II. Remember, everywhere else in the world was laid flat except the United States, right? So during those years, other countries they were still beginning to rebuild from the Marshall Plan and other things like that. So Oakland, the way my brother and all of the people would do it, they would work. The brothers would get a girlfriend. She would get on welfare. Okay, they would work at the cannery. My brother did it, and a lot of them did it for the early years. They would work at the cannery for all that summer season, work all that overtime. They would build up their unemployment, what they called po' boy. We used to call unemployment po' boy. And they would draw po' boy for 26 weeks. That meant they were living good, comfortable lives, technically. They would work all the summer, all the overtime, right, at the cannery, build up their unemployment. In those days, they got $55 a week unemployment. You know, that wasn't too bad because you only made $90 or $100 a week on a regular job. So they did good, and that was the lifestyle in California. So that's why the migration patterns, one migration pattern said there was 16,000 black people per month arriving in Los Angeles in 1965, 1964. That's how strong the migration patterns was.
Let me ask you, do you know, my grandma used to tell me that we were related to Eldridge Cleaver.
Yeah, we were related to Eldridge Cleaver. You know, I knew Eldridge pretty well. We was over in Algeria together. We are related to No. I don't think Huey was from Eldridge them was from that area. The Cleaver family. That's the way my mother and them would relate to the Cleaver family. So your grandmother have a better connection, because I never asked Eldridge how was we connected. You know, I never asked him those familial questions. But we were connected because of the so-called Cleaver family. In fact, in Arkansas, if you remember, we got a lot of kind of high officials, judges, and all of that down there now. And you probably wouldn't remember one of the family reunions we had, and I was talking about Bill Clinton, and I was making fun of him. Our people from Arkansas looked at me and said, "Boy, you know, our family had one of our family reunions in the State House in Arkansas." Yeah. Juanita would remember exactly when and what it was. Sherry might, because Sherry keeps up on a lot of that stuff. You know, who's a judge. Yeah, so anyway, so our family have been stable. The reason we went to California was to live a better life. Now you got to remember, we migrated, my father was 51 years old when we migrated. So he wasn't a youngster, you know. And that's a big step when you kind of up in age a little bit, especially if you've been working on those farms, you know, all your life. That's not easy work. That's not fun work at all. Boy, that is, you know, in those days, it was all manual labor. You didn't have machines or nothing. I remember when my father would be plowing, I'd be sitting on the mule. When we got a tractor in 1951, I'd be sitting on the fender, or maybe it was Mr. Word's tractor. because I don't know, think we had mules and horses, them big old horses, almost big as Clydesdales, that we use them for plowing. I used to sit on the horse. My father would be on the mule. He's plowing, and I'm sitting on the mule, just checking it out. So one thing I have fond memories of the South, because I was 6 years old and just playing. You know what I mean? But everybody else, I was telling my father, it sure is beautiful down here. He said, hey, you just don't know. He remembers work. You know, and they all remember work. And I would tell my father when he was like my age, Daddy, I can get you in a little exercise program. And, you know, he said, exercise? They done worked all their life? Shoot. That's why they sit on the porch, you know, and what have you. But those old people they were steeped in where they came from. I don't know if you remember, my father used to say, your grandfather, or your great-grandfather, he used to sit on the porch with a rifle, and you know where they have squirrels in the park and all that? You probably don't remember that big pine tree that used to be out in front of our house. Shoot, my father would sit there with his rifle and right there in the middle of the city, and he would be like, see, we used to eat rabbits and squirrels. Most of the meat that you got was in the South was from hunting. That's why everybody would go coon hunting, everybody would go fishing, and everybody, most of the meat we ate was from hunting, you know, in those days. So he didn't think squirrels was some pretty little thing you throw at something to eat and what have you. He thought they was to eat, and he would sit right there in Oakland on the porch with a rifle. I said, Daddy, you gonna shoot the poor little squirrel? He said, shoot. Anyway, the reason we went to California, it was basically economic, and it was no future in Arkansas. And you can see that now, that it was the right decision. And it was the right decision.
One other question I had about a great grandfather, your father. What did he do for work when he came to California? My dad used to, allude to like that he had some kind of either was involved in some club nights or bootlegging or something. I don't know.
Okay. Now you want to get into some history. Now, I used to think everything, just like if I would talk to people now, they'd say, that nigga lying. But my father used to talk to me, he'd say the same. He would say, well, in 1920, such and such, I was working in Hot Springs, and that's where I knew Al Capone from. And I was looking, Al Capone was all on TV, and I was thinking, then I remembered Al Capone's vacation spot was Hot Springs, Arkansas. You know what I mean? So then I began, and then when I was doing what I did, he would begin to tell me about some of the stuff he would do. And it was bootlegging. Now here's what happened. When my father came out to California, he had only a few years of work left in him. There was a foreman at McGuire and Hester, was an older white man. My father was his friend because he used to live in Stockton. We used to go out there and pick fruit off of his trees and everything when I was younger. He used to give my father extra jobs. Like now they have these little flashing lights, but in those old days, they used to have a big ball with a wick at the top, and going down the street at construction sites, it was like a big camp, it was like a lantern, you know, fire, you know, like that's how you knew it didn't have flashing lights. So anyway, he would give my father all of those jobs for extra money. And so we would go out every weekend with my father and put those lanterns up, take them down. Now, when that foreman died, or when he retired, they got a new foreman. And the new foreman was based on work. My father was too old to get down in them holes and dig like all the young guys. So he was let go. But it wasn't no big deal. When my father was let go, he got back into his old profession that he used to do from time to time in California. But back in Arkansas, they did, him and his friends, one of his best friends lived on 84th Avenue. In fact, we stayed at his house when we first came to California. Okay, for a while, till we got our place down there on Spencer Street. Anyway, my father was, well, let's just say he ran a gambling establishment. The first was up on 85th with Pool Hall Brown them. Now, when my father got laid off, he told Pool Hall Brown them, like, hey, y'all got the pool hall, you got the tables and everything. We could use the 2 back tables, or at least one of them back tables for gambling. And that's what they did. And my father was kind of well known, because when I knew how well he was known was when I was getting arrested in 1967, right there on 82nd Avenue, 1257 82nd Avenue, in those apartment buildings there. My father came around, and when I was being arrested, they had me in the room up in our apartment. They was searching. And so my father came in, and they said, oh, it's the gambler, the vice squad. The whole vice squad was there, and they knew my father. So, no, they knew my father well. And, you know, I had so much trouble with the police in Oakland, as you probably know. My father told me, boy, you ought to give the white man his share. In other words, in them old gambling establishments down south, you know, you give the sheriff a little bit and you can run your regular Negro establishment, right? That's the way it went.
So that's what he was doing in Arkansas.
That's what he was doing in Arkansas. That's why we had a little money down there. And that's...
He was the son of a preacher, right?
He was the son of a preacher, yeah.
And then was there a contentious relationship there with him going towards the gambling?
I have no idea. You got to remember, my grandfather had been dead for quite a while, and I don't know. Your grandmother would have known more about that, because my grandfather was still alive at that time, I'm sure. But I don't see it would be a whole lot of contention. It's like it was no contention between me and my father. Technically, I was his favorite almost. Well, you know, you can't tell your children you the favorite, you this, that. But I had his exact habits. In fact, at our house, in the mid and late 60s, when I was still living at home, my father would always bring his sack of money and he would count it, I mean by the penny, every night. Because he was serious with money like that. And then I would bring my little bag, not little bag by that time, and he would be so happy. We would both be sitting at the table counting our money. And he was so happy. You got to remember, none of the other families had those habits. That's why, you know, I had money and kept money, because the habits, I learned everything I learned from my father. I watched him. I never asked him no questions like, hey, what's this? But he told me before I left to run off overseas, He said, boy, I don't think you're going to be able to make no money overseas. Of course, I did. That's the only thing that he told me that was different. When I went to Colombia and, used to send all that that stuff back. So anyway, he told me, if you want to get all this problem solved, you just give them white folks, because the vice squad was always corrupt, just like on TV. You pay them their share, and they leave you alone. You see? So that was his advice. Man, just give them their little share, and they'll be gone, And so he had connections with the Oakland Police Department, yeah. Because he paid them their share, that's all. You can't run a gambling establishment. And first he was at the pool hall on 85th, and then I think he had on 94th. His next establishment with his little crew was down between 94th and 96th on East 14th. So yeah, he did all right. He did very well. I know he left your great-grandmother pretty well off, And whatever she didn't spend, your grandmother helped us spend. Anyway, they did all right. They did all right. He looked out for his family. We never was hungry and stuff like that. We had, man, they talking about how bad people was doing. We had big biscuits and stuff every morning, big cuts of meat and shoot. I don't remember none of that poverty and I thought it was poor. I thought everything was poor till I realized what everybody else was doing. So no, he took care of us real good. He took care of us real good. So all of my memories about that, my father and mother. There's one thing that about this that I regret. You know what that is? I recorded the Ream side of the family, but I never recorded my mother's side. I never recorded. I guess it was because everybody always recorded through the fathers in those days. That's 1984. They remembered from their father's side. And I never recorded outside of the family from my mother's side. But I have pictures of Izzard. Yeah, Izzard. There's a guy out here, he was part of our family. They were all Izzards, and that part of the family was, if you've seen any pictures of my grandmother, she was a half-breed, Native American. So that means my mother was one quarter, so that means I would be the standard Negro, 1/8 Native American. You got to remember, Arkansas, Oklahoma, and all of that, the Trail of Tears, that was all the Trail of Tears area. Arkansas, they moved through Tennessee, Arkansas, and then Oklahoma. And most of it stopped at Oklahoma. And that's why all those black towns was in Oklahoma, right next to Arkansas. And they had a few in Arkansas also. But the ones in Oklahoma was more liberated. That's why Black Wall Street in 1921 was attacked. That's Oklahoma. First time a bomb was dropped on an American soil was 1921 to help blow up Black Wall Street. And we never recovered from that. Yes. All right.
So what about, really I want to tie this story to Oakland, the city, because a lot of stuff that you were telling me about how economics and business developed for black folks in Oakland.
Right.
And turned into as far as
Okay, let me,
business and
okay, the business end. Okay, in the United States, in 1968, Martin Luther King uh, went to Chicago to try to start an economic enterprise zone. And of course, he was assassinated and he didn't get a chance to finish the project. But East Oakland was the only black economic enterprise zone in the United States that was successful. Let me explain how it happened. Even when you were younger, you would remember all the talk in Oakland would be about the things that we had done before. Okay, my idea was this, and I was doing it naturally. Malcolm X had the idea that blacks should control everything that go in their community and everything that come out of their community. And also the idea of money circulating in the black community. There's the idea or the reality from research, they say in the Jewish community, money circulates 11 times before it go out. Well, my idea was this. First of all, when I started making a lot of money, 1966, 1967, I was the only one living like I was living. And all of my friends had to go to work. They worked for Sherman-Williams Paint Company. They worked for GM out in Sunnyvale. Everybody had a job.
how did you first start making money? Like, what was the first thing you remember?
When I started making big money, technically it was marijuana. Yeah, I'm the first person to ever get rich in Oakland selling marijuana. Because, look, when I came home from prison in 1965, I was a so-called black Muslim. I used to take the brothers over to San Francisco to the temple over there. And in the car, they'd be smoking weed and all that. And I was probably getting a contact high. In fact, I'm sure I was. And I would ask them all the questions. Hey, how much this cost? How much? They said, well, a half a pound is $50. I said, and they sold it in matchboxes. I said, how many matchboxes can you get out of half a pound? They'd say 35 or something like that. So this went on for a long time. Finally, something happened. My friends borrowed $200 from me, and they paid me back the $200, and then they gave me big, those cellophane wax paper packages of marijuana. They gave me, it must have been 50 of them as a gift for loaning them the money. And I have reasons why they did it, but I'll just use this for now, the surface reason. Then I sold that marijuana. Remember, I didn't smoke weed, I didn't do nothing. I was a black Muslim. But I sold that marijuana, and I had $500. You have to remember, if you don't make but $100 a week, I was working down on 85th and San Leandro at the box company. And all of a sudden, I done sold that stuff in less than a week, and I got $500. So I was in business from then on. I took that $500, reinvested it, and turned it into this, that, and other, and it just exploded. So I said when I started, I wanted to be the main supplier of marijuana in Oakland. And that wasn't hard because they would have periods where it was a lot of marijuana, other times it would be dry. So I said, I want to make sure that anybody that want it, they can always get it. And I did that. That's what I gave people, a lot of what they bought, you know what I mean, for a little price and good quality. So I took over the whole thing. I mean, it was no time before I was nigger rich, as they used to call it. And then what I wanted to do was, all of my friends had jobs in those days. I was the only one that lived like I lived, you know. I didn't go to work, and so the way I interpreted this, I'm in heaven all by myself. So I want everybody else to live like I live. So that's when I started investing money with everybody. Whatever they wanted an investment or aid or assistance, I helped. You know, when I had all the businesses I had, I know I had 3 or 4 record shops. Well, I had to have people employed there. In fact, you remember Sherry's first job was at my record shop up on 85th. And you got to remember, at that time, all of our relatives, except for your grandmother, everybody else worked for me. And then everybody else, you know, they used to call me the mayor of East Oakland. They said I hired more people in the government, which I did. So that black economic enterprise zone meant this. We brought money into East Oakland from all over the regions. You remember now, if you're a big supplier, you bring money into the community. And we circulated that money so everybody in East Oakland got a part of it. You can ask your Aunt Sherry how many, or ask your father, how many people in East Oakland was driving Cadillacs and buying their own homes, and they were only 21 or 22 years old in those days.
I have 2 questions. One, I wanted to know about what the case was that got you in prison in 1965, and how you decided to turn to Islam at that time. Was that during you were in prison, or did you turn to Islam before?
Okay, when I accepted Islam, the black nationalist form, the Nation of Islam style of Islam, I had went to prison. Now, I went to actually Pine Grove Forestry Camp in 1962. Yeah, and so I stayed in, by the time I got to Forestry Camp, it was 63, and I was supposed to get out in 63. We had a ride, 64, I was supposed to get out in 63. Then I got transferred to PSI, Preston School of Industry. Then they transferred me to the penitentiary there in Tracy, DVI, Duell Vocational Institution. Then they had a ride in 64. I jumped up on the boxing ring and told them charge to save the life of one of the brothers who was getting attacked by the Euros. Then I didn't get home till 1965. But it wasn't a big deal what I did going to prison. But when I got out of prison, the whole world was different. It was a civil rights movement, right? The white kids in Berkeley was, Oakland, Berkeley, and San Francisco, you may not know it, that was the hub of revolutionary and idealistic culture in the United States. Haight-Ashbury in San Francisco, that was a mecca for young white kids. UC Berkeley, People's Park, 64, Mario Savio, the free speech movement at Berkeley, all of those things were happening. In Oakland, 1966, the Black Panther Party, all right? So in 1966 also, our structure and our organization, you got to remember, as far as gangsters go, we was the first ones to organize on that level in that whole region. You can ask your father, he'll tell you. He said that was New York style organization in California. So, but we were different. At least I put it this way, I was different than all the other gangsters and pimps, the Ward brothers and all those guys. They got money for themselves. But after I got rich, remember what I said? I looked around and said, who wants to be in heaven all by themselves, right? In other words, I have this money, I have these cars, and all my friends are going to work. And I can't have no fun with my friends because they're all at work. You see what I mean? So that is the main reason that I said, hey man, you want to do a little bit of this or do a little? I would almost encourage people that any vision or any dream they had, I'll invest in it with you. Just give it a try. And a lot of them worked. Plus the businesses that I had myself, that I had to technically hire people, to take care of those businesses. That's why East Oakland was different than North Oakland and West Oakland. All the people on that side of town and everywhere else, all the other gangsters was about themselves or their little crew. But we was about helping black people. It was still some of that black nationalism. Remember, by the time I was doing what I was doing, I was still in the black nationalist mentality. I was doing everything I did. At the bottom of all of that was a black nationalist mentality. Now, as far as prison, when I left the country and went overseas, that was way up I got that case down in LA, 1971. I left the country and then I started fighting it. I came back to fight the case in late 73 or 74. And those years is when I came to the Sunnah. When I came out of Leavenworth in 76, I was a real genuine Muslim practicing what we call Quran and Sunnah. In other words, it wasn't that Nation of Islam, black man is God, white man is the devil stuff. Although that's where I started, but we made the transition because one great personality, Imam Warithuddin Muhammad, he transferred us. And then after a while, we moved along because we say he's running, but he's running too slow. This was what we thought. But he did a great job. And that was a transition from Nation of Islam to true Islam. Now you have to remember, when I left the United States and I went to Algeria and Egypt and Sudan, and I lived in Dar es Salaam, I began to see real Muslims, like we are now. They was praying properly, they was doing all of this stuff. And so I began to get a clearer picture of what real Islam is, Right.
Well, I was going to say, we can kind of wrap up so I don't keep you all day, and we can kind of section it out. I think over the course of maybe 3 or 4 hour-long conversations like this,
Right.
I can get everything down to really at least have a really tight overview and a timeline. I'm not just going to take some of the notes.
Okay. No, that's fine. The other thing is, I have my own personal timelines where I did what I did. That's pretty well set. I have either the paperwork or the reality. The other thing is, I'll listen to the tapes again that I made of my father in 1984, so that any historical stuff I can.
Yeah, I want to tie everything to I love what you said about
Yeah.
things like that because it gives me a good point in time. You know what I mean? So anything I can tie to like historical events and times, and also anything he shares about just like the life in Arkansas when he was young. It's
Hey,
really cool.
let me, everything that I watch, I can relate exactly back to that period or those things. Did you ever see that movie about what's the guy chopped everybody's head off down in the brother that did all the chopping up, 1838?
Oh, I don't know about that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Y'all know everybody. They made a movie about it. What's that movie?
Oh, you talking about Rosewood?
No, not Rosewood. Nat Turner. Nat Turner. Okay, remember the scene in Nat Turner when there's a little boy not turns him in, but he gets weak and the white man make him tell on him a little bit? And then that little boy's face morphs into the Civil War. And that little boy, when I saw that scene, I remembered all of our older relatives. That was it was 1838, Nat Turner. Remember I said 1831, 1833. My ancestors, right? Your ancestors. And then they morphed into the Civil War. See, that was a big deal, that Civil War experience for black people. You got to remember you're on a plantation and white people keeping you on that plantation, right? And then you get a chance, you get trained and uniformed up, and now you can fight those same people and you're on the winning side. That's a big deal. That's not, we would look at it like a movie, it's just a great movie, black people. But you got to remember where they was coming from. Man, that's unbelievable. That's freedom plus for them. I'm talking about for them. You know what I mean? That's freedom plus. And they got to wear shoes and they got all of that stuff. You got to remember, in the South, we didn't get shoes until we started the school. That's when we got shoes. I run around as a kid, it was always barefooted. No, you was always barefoot. What would you have shoes on for? Huh?
Yeah, my kids run around barefoot now because they don't like shoes. I don't know why.
No, but like you say, that's the way we were meant to travel, is barefooted. But shoes help when it comes to stepping over rocks and all of that stuff. You know what I mean? You need shoes then. But see, look, I'm telling you, for me, I feel like I'm about the luckiest and one of the most fortunate human beings alive, because the stuff that I've been through, you think that it should make you mean, hatred, and all of that stuff. It don't happen. I am happy. I never, you know what, and I'm going to close with this. I never signed up to be happy. I signed up for struggle, sacrifice, longevity, and all of that. I didn't sign up to be happy. And guess what? That's what I got. I didn't even, I didn't even have it on the list. I wanted to that, and I want to be happy. No, that came with the territory. So anyway, I'll listen to those tapes, and when you get ready, we'll set up another appointment, and every.
If it's easy for you, we can do it, every day, just knock it out in a row, or you want to wait a couple, whatever easiest for you.
No. We can try to, because I've been going down to that thing. I may not go down for today's Wednesday.
Yeah.
We can do another taping tomorrow if you like.
Yeah, we'll do tomorrow. And I think also if you watch some of the footage, it might spark some memories too. So that'll be cool.
Okay.
YouTube, and you'll remember stuff tonight. I'm sure. And you're like, oh yeah, I should mention this. That's what always happens. So
Oh yeah, no, I'm gonna go back.
time to talk.
I'm gonna listen to. Believe it or not, I talk about a little bit of this stuff in some of the talks that I give. Yeah, I don't know if you ever watch any of the things we put on. We have a what is that?
We have a YouTube channel and a Facebook page.
Yeah, we have a YouTube channel and a Facebook page. I don't know if you ever watched that, but it's kind of.
Look at it. I know I seen you on Facebook. Let me make sure I got the right Facebook though. Let's see. What's the name of the page on Facebook?
Oh, it's Imam Abdulalim Musa. Let me know if you need me to spell that.
Imam Abdul Ali Musa, Facebook. We've been going down several days in a row, every now and then, to these demonstrations here in D.C. And we've been taping a program every day. And it's been going well. Well, we call them teach-ins. Yeah. We've been doing some every day.
How you spell Ali?
Okay, the whole name would be Imam, I-M-A-M, then Abdul Alim, A-B-D-U-L-A-L-I-M, Abdul Alim Musa, M-U-S-A.
I got it spelled right, but it didn't come up.
On Facebook, what do,
Put a hyphen in between the Abdul and the Ali.
Okay,
Yeah, put a dash there.
let's try that. If you go on the Facebook, you said, is it a personal page or like a
Oh, yeah, it's a personal page, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know why I won't search, but I'm gonna try it.
yeah, no, just try it one, what is yours?
Yeah, I typed in, yeah, same thing we gave him.
No, I got it.
Oh, you got it?
Oh, okay.
You know so I searched inside Facebook, I can't find it. But when I searched Google, Google found it.
Okay.
Oh, okay, all right.
So I got you.
Okay, right.
Same time tomorrow. We'll spend like another hour or so.
That'll be perfect. That'll be perfect.
I'll talk to you in the morning.
All right then. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Okay, and so I live streamed this,
Uh-huh.
so that's still live, and a couple of the people asked.
Oh, you live streamed this
Yeah,
too?
this interview. This
Oh, my goodness.
and,
Yeah.
thinking ahead a little bit.
Right.
Learning from the last interview. Because someone asked about a little bit about the family history. Well, some comments was that, this was a question. This one was a question. Brother Imam Musa, how far back does Islam go in your family? He was asking, it seemed like your ancestors were practicing some form of Islam. Is this correct?
No, that's not correct.
Okay.
My family were, like I say, my grandfather, Cephas Reams, was, in 1900 he was a deacon, but he probably graduated to a preacher. I mean, the name is on that founding stone right now down there. It says 1900, Cephas Reams. But no, I don't think that they were. Of course, when we skip back to when you skip back to Africa, I know that's what was happening then. But no, I don't.
Okay. All right.
Was there any more questions?
Yeah, this one was it's a little bit off topic, but I'll ask it anyway. Can you give your interpretation of the relationship between Prophet Muhammad and Ali in regards to the time to unite old and young. For Ali was the only to stand for Badr and where we are today, inshallah.
They want me to answer that?
Yeah, they asked the question. Yeah.
Okay, the question was about the relationship between Ali and Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Well, Imam Ali was 10 years old when the Prophet, peace be upon him, got revelation, and when he asked who would be my protector, nobody, they just stood back, and then Ali said, "I will." And then they was laughing because it says the little boy here is going to be here. Well, if the question is about unity, okay, if that the question is about unity, I don't use that instance for unity. I use the instance of Islam, the unity of God, right, and the unity of humanity. And we use the same ayats, who is better in speech than one that calls people to Allah, work righteous deeds, and say, I am a Muslim. And then there's two words that come out in the next verse, or the next ayat, about Hamim and Wali. It may be between you and they, who was hatred become as your good friend. But before you get to that, you have to return return good for evil. If they do you evil, you know our basic commentary, how we feel about white people. You know, that they have not been that friendly toward us. But that don't have a whole lot to do with the ones we see now, but it doesn't make any difference. We're going to return good for the evil they did to us, the whole evil, the slavery, all of that. We're going to return good to them because the Quran says, use the word wali, you may become, wali, their friend, their protector, their advocate, their lawyer, you know what I mean, their spokesman, And Hamim means warm and fuzzy. You may become their warm and fuzzy, like warm water, warm and fuzzy friends. Now, the wahda, that's for humanity. Now, the wahda amongst the Muslims, we have a command from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. If you see wrong being done, stop it with your hand. You can't at least feel bad about it, but that's the weakest kind of faith, So you're commanded, if you see wrong, you stop it with your hand, military, physical power, if you can. If you can't, speak out about it. Speak out about it. Okay, that's where we are now. We all feel very strange that whenever we went to these demonstrations recently, we were the only Muslims there representing Islam or speaking. Now, we saw one or two families here and there, and one or two. Yesterday, it was one lady with hijab taking pictures, but she didn't stay that long. It was another one that had interviewed me. She goes to the Turkish masjid out there, the rich folks masjid. Anyway, or just feel bad about it. The other thing to remember about unity of Muslims, وَاعْتَصِمُوا بِحَبْلِ اللَّهِ جَمِيعًا وَلَا تَفَرَّقُوا. وَاعْتَصِمُوا comes from the word asama. Asama used to be the capital or fortified city, the capital city, or it was fortified. That ayat is saying, وَاعْتَصِمُوا, hold on or fortify yourself, secure yourself. by holding on to the rope of Allah, jami'an, all together, and be not divided. There's just hundreds of ayats. You're the best community, all of that. It means unity. The suggestion I would make for the Muslims right now is to put Islam first. Don't put your little crew or your race or your little scheme, your little personal scheme. You can't do that. If you do that, you're not going to be successful. And you want a real question? We've been here for all these years with the whole United States government trying to send us on our merry way, and they can't do it. Physically, psychologically, I mean a total encirclement, and it don't mean nothing. That means that there's some protection coming. And if we wasn't doing right, that's why every time I get a chance, I say, I ain't doing nothing wrong. If I think it's wrong, I ain't gonna do it. If Islam calls it, I ain't gonna do it. I'm not gonna do it. Because, not just the benefits that we're already getting, but if we wouldn't be here unless Allah wanted us to be here with all this stuff that's happening. So no, tell them Islamic unity is not fard kifaya, it's fard ayn. You're supposed to do it. It's right after worship of Allah. The unity of Muslims? Well, okay, it's fard kifaya, but it should be, it's not fard ayn, because that means it's like salat, like zakat. You gotta, boy, but it's wajib, I know that. It's right on. It's big time. Let's call it a farida. It's fard for us to step into unity. And since, are they listening to this? Yeah. Okay, the other thing then. Since you're listening to this, every now and then something comes up to where we want to strike out at the Muslims. The reason we took off the day before yesterday and went yesterday is because we had a feeling of, I'll tell those Muslims a thing or two. Then I just rested. I said, I'm not going today. Why? Because that ain't the right. Well, okay, it's allowable, but I didn't think it was the right thing to do. And a little bit slipped out in everything we were saying from time to time, but it wasn't the main focus. I'm telling you, you got to swallow big, you got to be big, and you got to remember we're in a war with the shaitan himself. And he got a whole crew, right? And he's gonna attack us from the front, from behind, all sides. Hey, he gonna hit us with everything in the book. He's not restricted. And remember the Quran says the shaitan is persistent. If you're not persistent in doing right, he's still persistent in doing wrong and leading you to wrong. So thank you very much for the question. Are there any more questions? Yeah. That's it. Okay, alhamdulillah. Getting a little tired, huh? I can imagine.